What's up, everybody? Hopefully you guys are doing great as always. My name is Itai. Analyzing gameplay is one of the best ways to improve. So today I'm going to be analyzing my viewers' gameplay. If you want me to analyze your gameplay specifically, then you can submit your game via the form in the description. Also, we are less than 10 subscribers away from 500. So if you never want to miss a chess video and you want to be part of this awesome journey, then smash that sub button. Now let's get into the banger of a game that I have for you. So you're playing as black and the game begins with white playing e4. Very solid move and a very common move. Now here there's a lot of responses. You can go with the Scandinavian or probably the most common response is just playing e5, which is what was played. I prefer the French defense, but e5 is a very solid move too. So well done there. And now you can run into a lot of the very common lines that you'll see in classical games. So you can see knight to f3, and then knight c6, and then the bishop pins the knight here. Well, it isn't quite a pin yet, but it brings the bishop to a useful square where it demotivates this pawn from ever being pushed forward, because that would encounter or that would make this knight to be pinned, right? So this is a pretty useful square, and this is a very common position known as the Ruy Lopez, okay? So this is a very common position that you might get to. And here as black, there's a couple of options, and unfortunately, one of the more common ones is playing a move like a6. And this is something you have to think about all the time when you're playing. Does this bishop here really bother me? Not really, right? Worst case, you move this pawn out, you see a trade, and you have to get doubled pawns. All right, that's a pretty bad scenario, but it's fine. So you don't want to start wasting moves trying to kick the bishop out, especially when a move like this doesn't really even kick the bishop out. Instead, it allows the bishop to just, move back. So you definitely do not want to start wasting moves on that, unless this bishop here is a really big threat, right? So as long as this bishop isn't a huge deal, you don't need to bother. So instead, a move like f6 with your knight is great, just developing more pieces, gaining more control of the center, and maybe getting ready to castle, faster. So it's a wonderful move. But regardless, the move a6 was played, and like I mentioned, the bishop just moved back, right? So it doesn't really do a whole lot. Here, one of the more interesting moves I've ever seen was played, and this is a blunder. But d5 was played. Now, I've seen a lot of moves from this point. I've seen f6 here. I've even seen, something like d6. But playing a move like d5 is very, very, it's bad. It's a blunder. The reason that it's a blunder is that it allows white to go into a pretty nice variation for white, which essentially starts with the knight taking the pawn on e5. After the knight takes the pawn on e5, you can see that now you cannot capture back with your own knight because this knight is obviously pinned, which, like I said earlier, it kind of justifies the reason that you want the bishop here, because after you move the d pawn, this knight becomes pinned, and so it's no longer really valuable. So this is a great bishop here. Regardless, black has to do something, so you can try a move like this, trying to win the knight, or at the very least win the pawn back, but it doesn't really work, because after the knight simply moves back and you gain the pawn, you can see the idea of tempo coming into play, which I actually made a video about tempo. If you're interested, it'll pop up right now in the top. I've actually made a video about it, and you can see it come into play now, where you as white, you play this move, or your opponent as white plays that move, and now you're forced to move your queen, right? So white is gaining tempo, and this is a very big idea, because now the second that black moves the queen away, white can now capture the pawn here, and not only win the pawn, but also win the knight. So once again, the importance of this bishop comes very clear, in the game. So this would have been a huge blunder if white managed to see the move, but luckily white did not see the move, and instead plays a move like d3. From this point, you just can take, and that was what was played. And after white takes back, well, the better move would have been to take this pawn rather than taking back. The problem with taking back, if we look here, the problem with taking back is that you lose your right to castle as white, okay? So white ended up playing the better move because now white can no longer castle. So it's much better to take back this pawn than taking back this pawn. So always think about what pawn or what piece do I want to take back. What piece will be better for me. The game continues, and now a very strong move was played by black. This is a wonderful move, and it's not the easiest to spot, but it is a very great move because now you're just taking advantage of so many unprotected pieces. And that is something that white needs to start thinking about. It's great to have a knight in the center. It's great to have a bishop here, but it's only great if those pieces are protected. If this knight was an outpost, that would be wonderful. If this bishop, was more protected, maybe a move like this was played and the queen was protecting it, that would be wonderful as well. But as the position stands, none of that is right now happening, right? So both of these pieces are hanging, and white has to do something. Now here, white played, a move that a lot of people might play, which is just taking the knight, hoping not to lose any material. And yes, this is true, you don't really lose material, but I think the better move was to play this move here. The idea is if if black decides to take the bishop, then white just simply forced mate, right, with this. So that cannot happen. And obviously now the knight is protected as well. So black, you really don't have much you can do. You can try to play a move like this, now not allowing the queen to go here and force mating. So this bishop is once again hanging. But the problem with this move, or it's not really a problem, but you can simply now develop a knight and protect all your pieces. The queen protects this piece, the knight protects this piece, and the only thing that's really happened is that white managed to develop more pieces. So realistically, this is a pretty good position for white, and so black would not really come out with any advantage here. So instead, white decides to just take, and after the trade happens, you can see that the position just brought back, right? Both of these pieces were just taken away. All right. And here you can see that the knight is hanging, right? The reason that you brought back the queen is to hang, is for the knight to be hanging. But the problem with moving the knight back is that you are, if anything, undeveloping a piece, and you always want to be thinking, where are my pieces the best? And the knight is certainly not the best here. It has no control really on the center other than this one square, and it doesn't do a whole lot here. Okay, so instead of undeveloping a piece there, maybe you want to develop this piece and still protect the knight, but bring a bishop to a pretty useful piece. The knight here is a wonderful spot for it if it can, stay here. And this bishop will help it stay here. And the bishop here, it's a pretty nice spot as well. So you always want to be thinking, where do I want my pieces to go? And instead of having to move back to protect the piece, is there any piece that I can use to protect the piece that's hanging that will still be useful for both of the pieces? So you always want to be thinking about that. Regardless, the knight decides to move, and you can see that this is a very open position. No player has really developed a lot of pieces, and no player is really, close to having a lot of control. So at this point, you want to start bringing your pieces out. You want to be the first player to control the center, because a lot of times that allows you to control the game. So this would have been a wonderful time to play this move and just bring pieces out. Anyways, the game continues. Also, by the way, this move here, it's a pretty big blunder because it allows for this quite nice tactic, which is a discovery, obviously. Now, the bishop always was threatening this, but it was protected by the queen. But now with this move, this other queen is also attacking the knight. So you're attacking a pawn, you already won a pawn, and you're also attacking a knight. So this is quite bad. I guess as white, the best move would be maybe playing this move, protect the knight. But it isn't a great move at all. But the white decided actually not to protect the knight. Probably they just missed the fact that this is also discovery, and the queen can also attack it. and white decided to just take back the pawn. Obviously, black, knowing that this knight is undefended, just simply takes the knight, and you can see that this is just really great for black right now. You're up a piece. You have more control in the center. Once again, both players don't have a lot of control, but you still have more control. And in general, this is a pretty pleasant position. Anyways, the game just continues as normal, and you can see that now white decides to block or to move a pawn here to block the bishop, which is a pretty nice idea. Obviously the idea is to not lose the queen, but also it gains tempo. And again, as white and as black, you want to be thinking, how can I gain tempo? So here it gains tempo. The bishop has to move somewhere back, which allows white to develop more pieces. Here, actually, this was an attempt to gain tempo, but it didn't successfully work because of this move, where now you're threatening to capture the pawn, and white has to do something. So actually, black has managed to regain that tempo. You can see that white played a fantastic move here, which is a move like this. It keeps the pawn slightly protected, but it just checks your opponent, right? So this is a pretty great move right here. And you can protect it with the bishop. You can protect it also with the knight. It really is a matter of preference here. I would go with the bishop because I want the knight here where it has more influence on the center. But both are an alright way to protect it. Here, white plays another blunder, which is moving the bishop here, trying to make the queen uncomfortable, but the queen has a very nice spot to go to where it also wins a pawn, right? So after this trade happens, black is just, up top so much. One thing that I wanted to mention here is that white does not want to take this trade. White is down a lot of material. In fact, we can count the material. There's 2 rooks, a couple of minor pieces. I believe that white is down a bishop and a pawn. So white being down all this material, white does not want to trade. White wants to have all of this material to be able to use it to hopefully win back the material. But regardless, white decides to trade. And then white just moves out more pieces. And black has played this game pretty well so far. There has been a couple of blunders. The one that I remember right now is the d5 blunder. But in general, black has played a pretty solid game. Anyways, the game continues, pinning the knight. Pretty nice move. And then the king and the rook just castling, hoping to get the rooks involved, which is a pretty good effort for white. You can see that black's one downfall right now is that although this rook can get involved, this rook can't really get involved that easily, especially with this knight still being here. So white wants to get its rooks involved much faster than black does to hopefully regain that advantage. Anyways, black also decides to castle. Fairly nice move, just kind of, trying to get that control for the open d file. So, very, very common. And now, like I just said, white brings its other rook into the game, trying to get both rooks involved. Here, black makes a trade. I would have maybe even done this trade earlier. The problem is, this knight here is no longer pinned. By moving the rook here, it actually repins the knight. But I would have just done the trade earlier because as black, you're up the advantage. You want to just trade all your pieces out. So you're going to end up having more material than white, sorry. But anyways, the game continues, and now you trade, and now you bring out your other rook as well. So both players just trying to get more control on the open central files, hoping to get both rooks on them. The game continues, and here a pretty funny move was played, bishop over here. The idea obviously is having this discovery, but the thing is the bishop here doesn't really threaten anything, so black can simply move the knight, and so it's a pretty funny discovery. But it does give white this control on the center, so it isn't a horrible move. Here, there is a blunder that was made, though, which is just having this bishop unprotected. This rook here, was just protecting the bishop, and now this bishop is unprotected the second that you interfere with this rook and bishop alignment. So white can simply take the bishop, And here, an effort was made to trap the bishop, which is actually a very good effort. You can see that the bishop, once again, going to that very funny move that was made, the bishop put itself in a place where it has one bad move and a full file. But if you can just take away that full file, now the bishop is pretty much trapped. So the king will be able to go over there. So the bishop, it was a very questionable move that was made, moving it there. Here, just putting more pressure on the knight. And this is just a pretty a good series of moves by white, just putting pressure. And black also blundered, don't get me wrong, but white managed to just use both of its rooks, whereas black did not manage to use both of its rooks. So white did a good effort to try to get back that material that it's lost. But here they trade, which they probably shouldn't have. Once again, you're down material, you don't really want to trade. Although you have managed to win back some of that material. So it is, a little bit better for you to trade now than it was earlier. And here just trying to kick the knight out, but here a very wonderful tactic was used. Hopefully you guys can see it. These king and rook alignments are pretty tricky, especially when there's a knight in the mix, because this fork here is just pretty crushing. And white decides to resign, but after white moves, you just win the rook, and you have more pawns that you can win, and more pawns after that you can win. It's game over pretty much. So overall, there were a lot of tactics that were used in this game, and a lot of tactics that were not used, that were missed in this game. So hopefully, you learned a lot from this game. Make sure you subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys next time.